What do you do when people just don't like you? You come into a party or a meeting or a first date and you can feel and see in people's faces that they've frozen up, maybe even taken an instant dislike to you. Has that ever happened? I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and this video is part of a series where I'm talking about connection, how it happens, how to improve it, and how it can go wrong. Childhood PTSD is, at its core, an injury to our ability to connect with other people. So in this video, I want to look at one of the hardest things about learning to connect better, and that's seeing where we might be putting people off. And feeling disliked, it's one of the big issues that people ask me about over and over again. And I've been there too, more than once. And it's maybe true that sometimes we might be imagining that no one likes us. That's the sort of thing we do. And the solution for that is to get free of those thoughts as much as we can. And I'll talk about how to do that at the end of the video. But let's talk with the presumption that something really is happening. And if you didn't know why, how you could find out where you're going wrong, right? This is scary. But if you think about it, it's really important. If childhood PTSD is keeping you from being able to see something that you're doing that hurts people or pushes them away, and you could change that, then wouldn't you want to? I'm going to tell you probably what the mystery thing might be. And the reason I know is because, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but I've been that person. I've been both people, really, the one who gets pushed away and the one who is evidently doing the pushing. So, are you ready? Okay. It's probably one of three things. First, it could be an angry edge. Anger, okay? You might think that compared to how you used to be, you're not that angry, but as other people see it, there still could be a lot of anger there, and it's leaking out and hitting them with a harsh tone or subtle little criticisms or victim-y statements or defensiveness. You've probably noticed this fairly easily in other people, but it could be you're doing it. You know what it's like to be around someone who's kind of leaking anger. It kind of shuts you down. The second most likely possibility is that, okay, this one's going to hurt. It's self-centeredness. Now, this would be things like talking more than our share or making people uncomfortable because we're not talking, or we're missing the cue when it's time to say thank you or can I help or how'd your surgery go? Okay, have you been that person? Self-centeredness could also be putting a lot of demands on a social situation, things like asking people not to talk about certain subjects or taking other people to task for inaccuracies in conversations that were just meant to be like a little bit of banter, or using their opinions to always give your opinion, or just being overly negative or contrarian. That is self-centeredness too, and it can exhaust people. Now, the third most likely possibility of why people are pushing you away is, let's call it neediness. Now, this all sounds so painful, but if we face it together, we can do this, okay? So neediness can show up as being someone who takes favors, like invitations and food and help moving and listening, but doesn't return those favors. It can take the form of people-pleasing, overstaying our welcome, ignoring the cue when someone needs to get off the phone or leave. And this puts people in the uncomfortable position, and you've probably had to do this to someone, where they're talking, and after a while you just kind of have to interrupt them because you have to leave. And it feels terrible. And it feels so bad, in fact, that we prefer to just avoid people altogether rather than risk having to be the rude person that we don't want to be. So that could be happening. Okay? And those are my top three guesses for what the problem usually is if people are getting pushed away. Too much anger, too much self-centeredness, or too much neediness. Now, there are a jillion ways that we can offend other people, but to make that happen in less than a minute or two of meeting, it's probably one of those three things. Okay, so this is hard to hear. I know it is. But remember, almost everyone has these negative traits to some degree. You've seen it. Even people with perfect childhoods do it sometimes. It's human nature. And it's also part of our nature to crave connection and to try to grow. And yes, connecting and growing can be very hard when you've had childhood trauma. It can bring out the worst in us. And it's not our fault. In a home with abuse and neglect going on, it's not uncommon that kids come to feel invisible and invalidated. That definitely happened to me at times, and my reaction to that was to fight back by making my personality visible. I was talkative, I was loud, I was funny. But other people with CPTSD kind of fade away. They isolate themselves. They try not to make any waves. And some kids become people pleasers, and still other kids become bullies. It's so unfair. The need for love and acceptance turns into behaviors that take away love and acceptance. And it's one of the hardest things about the lingering effects of childhood trauma. When we need other people the most, our personalities start leaking out all over and push other people away. So when that's happening, you might be tempted to think it's some invisible factor, a vibe or a pheromone or even a curse. I've heard people say that, that's pushing people away. And it's hard to know what to think when your perception has been damaged by trauma, right? We blame ourselves too much, and then we blame ourselves not enough. But here's the thing. If friction or a cold shoulder is happening with lots of people, then you know what's the common denominator. It means at least part of the problem is right in here. So how can you find out what's going on? If you're going to change, you're probably going to need to know, because it's not very likely to change by itself. Not just because time passes, not because some other thing happens like you lose weight or you meet the perfect person to be with. Probably you're going to have to change. And I promise you, just trying, just being willing to face what's really going on and do whatever you can figure out to do, it tends to work. That's the only way things ever do work, really. Now, there's an art to being more conscious of yourself and your effect on people. And that awareness is the first thing to go after trauma. You know what I mean? Who can afford to be that tuned in to other people when you're going through hell inside? When you're scared, when active trauma is happening? That's just completely out of reach, right? But now you're safe. And now is your chance to look within and cultivate that sensitivity. That's something I talk about a lot in my courses. And the courses give kind of a structure where you can safely look around and see what's working and where are the big opportunities for change that might just be sitting there waiting for you to give them life. Because anger is hard to be around, and people with childhood PTSD or CPTSD, and everyone else for that matter, they're pretty attuned to whether someone's angry. You might have grown up with so much anger around you that you think this little in you is really barely anything, but other people can sense it. Even when to you, it just feels like you're speaking your mind. And you're thinking, why do they have to be so sensitive, right? But have you ever had anybody say that to you? Why are you so sensitive? It's not helpful. Those of us who have a lot of anger to heal, we can learn a lot from people who are trauma-free and sensitive. Now, I study these folks because I want to be sensitive. I want to be awake and alive and open to life. When your heart is sensitized, you learn that it's actually a lot of effort reacting to everything, being angry, self-centered, or needy, rather than just open, just kind of letting other people be themselves and admiring them. And with some people, we really got to set up boundaries, but with most of them, there is always a lot to admire. It's really surprising, in fact, how much people will kind of come toward you when you're busy noticing what's best about them. It's a very attractive energy, and being appreciative about what's happening in your midst has a natural tendency to balance out the other problems. There's less room to be self-centered. You forget to be needy. And that would be nice, right? It's not so far away. If you're in the early stage of healing, trust me, it just seems like other people hold the key to whether or not you're okay, and you're thinking you'll only be okay if they pay attention or comfort you or whatever it is you're needing. You think you wouldn't feel so empty. The loneliness would be over. But the trick is to quit trying to will the conditions different than what they are right now. You can admire that person or this moment just as it is. That's going to create a lot of room for people to come towards you and admire you. You might need to do a little research, especially if you don't know yet what negative tendency in you might be making people dislike you. If you're courageous and you're prepared to be gentle and considerate and willing to care for your own feelings about whatever they say, you can ask. That's a crazy idea, right? But you can ask people to tell you honestly if something is bothering them. And I recommend you make it very clean. Stick to the people who are fairly safe and considerate. Don't bring them implied criticism in the question. I noticed that you were being kind of not cool to me. No implied criticism. This is advanced healing, and sometimes it's the only way to get over that feeling that something's not right and people are somehow put off by you. You can ask. Now, you don't have to take their answer as the absolute truth, But don't argue with people if you asked. Just take it into consideration. And if it's helpful, you can let that be your next step to work on calming and gentling and relaxing that part of your personality. And if you think maybe they got it a little wrong, that's okay. Just think about that they got that feeling, and you can still work on that. Now, as we all know, this is not just a bunch of positive thinking. We have to make an effort sometimes to get free. It's the fearful and resentful thinking that's like a rusty lock, and you can't even get a key into it. You're locked out. Can't change. The best thing I've found to unlock this next level is what I call the daily practice. And that's a free course I teach, and it's a great place to get started. You can, in one sitting, just release a whole load of negative thoughts that make it hard for you to see what's going on out here and in here. And then you can do it regularly. There's a link to that in the description section below, as well as to my more advanced classes and my membership program. Getting free is what all the people in my membership program are working on, getting free and changing their lives. I love and respect them so much because what they're doing, there's nothing more noble or more holy than getting free.